and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Oh, we're on. Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
I'm Chris Cooper, sitting in for Ann Northrup.
Oh, welcome, Chris.
Thank
nice
you,
to
Andy.
see you. We're going to talk about your experiences and pride and everything else. But the big news, the biggest gay news of the week for the world was the Women's World Cup. It was the gayest event on the planet.
The House Ways and Means Committee moves to clean up the tax code for same-sex married couples.
And they did it unanimously. The number of LGBTQ elected officials in the United States was up in the past year 25%.
Pete Buttigieg, you may have heard of him, the out-gay presidential candidate, raised more money than any other candidate in the second quarter.
But most people still think he can't get elected. That was an interesting poll. The U.S. State Department's chair of the Human Rights Advisory Board is a leading opponent of LGBT rights.
African-American comedian and show host Jerrod Carmichael comes out, as does singer Lil Nas X, who's a very big deal, apparently, with his song Old Town Road.
The groping case against Kevin Spacey is on the verge of collapse, maybe have collapsed by the time you've seen this.
Art historian and AIDS activist Douglas Crimp dies at the age of 74.
A beloved figure. We're going to look back at more of the events commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Rebellion that we couldn't get to last week.
Same-sex marriage has begun in Ecuador and is closer to becoming reality in Northern Ireland, finally.
Michael Johnson, who was sentenced to 30 years by Missouri for HIV transmission, has gotten out 25 years early.
And Andy is going to tell us how Obamacare, also known as the Affordable Care Act, is in renewed peril in federal court. But first, Lesbia victoriae. That's actually the scientific name of a hummingbird, the black-tailed train bearer that's found in Ecuador and other Central American countries. But it is an apt war cry for the major parade that we just had in New York celebrating the American champion women's soccer team.
For those of you who don't know, Chris Cooper is a famous birder.
I'm not that famous, but I'm a birder.
Well, you were in the HBO movie about birders.
I was.
You were. So the Women's World Cup, I mean, I actually watched a soccer match. I don't watch any soccer matches, but this pulled me in.
It pulled a lot of people in. It had huge ratings, bigger ratings than the men's final. Of course, there wasn't an American team in the men's final, but still. Bigger ratings.
And has earned more money, essentially, and drawn a bigger audience.
And given new impetus to the women's cries for equal pay, for equal work.
At the ticker tape parade, at the rally at City Hall, while the head of women's soccer for the United States was up there, people are shouting equal pay. He said we're going to have equitable pay, but there was a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on for that, but it was so exciting. This is there's an LGBT angle on this because Megan Rapinoe, we got a picture of her with the team. You got them up there. Oh, that's the next picture. That's of Kelly O'Hara on the U.S. women's soccer team. But there's Megan Rapinoe with her lavender hair after their victory, cheering. And this is a team with 5 out lesbian players, including her.
Ashlyn Harris, Ali Krieger, Adriana Franch, Tierna Davidson, and Kelly O'Hara.
Ali Krieger and Ashlyn Harris are engaged to each other.
Yeah. And that's not even them there. That's Kelly O'Hara kissing her girlfriend in the stands.
Yeah, and just a very natural thing, which anybody would do after a big victory, would go up to their partner and give them a kiss. But maybe we've been afraid to do that for years. And this is a group of women who are unafraid. So when Rapinoe scored 2 goals versus France in an earlier match, and this took place in Paris, she said, "Go gays, you can't win a championship without gays on your team. It's never been done before, ever. That's science, right there." Well,
she's also, of course, well known for her statement to Mr. Trump, where
I think she used a bad word.
She did use a bad word, but she basically said, "I'm not going to the White House because if they invite us, because that man's no good."
And I don't think most of my teammates are going to want to go either. And Trump was like pushed into a corner because Megan Rapinoe also has a tremendous social conscience about all the some of the terrible things about America. She said this country was founded on a lot of good ideals and slavery. And she talks about that. And so when the national anthem is played, she was taking a knee for a while. She was ordered to stand up, and she did, but she keeps her hands at her side. She doesn't put her hand over her heart. And Trump was criticizing her. Trump, who I'm sure does not know the words to the national anthem.
Well, they showed him once where he was supposedly singing along, and it was kind of like... Well,
talk about respect. Anyway, so they were sparring on Twitter, and she was getting the best of him, so he shut up. And when they finally won, he just had a kind of a bland message of support for the team, and now doesn't know what to do with them in terms of like having 2 of them maybe show up to the White House.
Well, presidential candidate New York Mayor de Blasio certainly knew what to do right away. He immediately threw them a parade because it was good for him and good for them.
He did. And so, it was just, it was amidst all this stress and the horror of Trump. I mean, Bill Ballman, our associate producer, was telling us that New York Magazine is having an issue announcing no mention of Trump in this issue of our magazine. And maybe that's what we need to get. We're sick of it. But amidst all this, it was a wonderful thing to have, a wonderful unifying thing to have. The Nation magazine said, "This is true patriotism, what they do.
And somebody else said, "This is a parade without tanks."
All right, maybe a little bit more on Trump. Contrast all that good feeling with the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, which Trump is a part of, as was Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew and Labor Secretary Acosta, who also may have resigned by now. I don't know. He's supposed to have his press conference as we're taping. And there's a William Barr connection to Epstein.
Really?
His father, Donald Barr, was the headmaster of the Dalton School and hired Jeffrey Epstein without qualifications as a middle school teacher for girls the school years ago.
Oh, my.
All right. You can say these are tenuous connections.
Well, the other not so tenuous connection is that Donald Trump, through a private exclusive party in Mar-a-Lago, this has just come to light, where there were, I believe, 30 guests. Himself, 28 women flown down there for the purpose, and Jeffrey Epstein.
How old were the women?
Well, that has not been revealed yet.
All right. And then more trouble for the president from New York. Our state senator, out-gay Brad Hoylman, his bill authorizing New York State to release the tax returns of the president to 3 congressional committees was signed by Governor Cuomo. And,
the reason why, just a little background, the reason why New York can do this is because Donald Trump files his taxes in New York. And the same taxes that he files for the federal government, he has to file for the state government. Now, the federal government isn't releasing them, so brilliantly, our New York legislators said, okay, we'll release the state version.
Well, so far, the head of the Ways and Means Committee in the House has not said he's interested in going that route. They have subpoenaed them. They're trying to do it through the courts. But hey, we want the whole election to be over before you get a look at them. I mean, this is part of his criminality. Trump had a setback on the citizenship question and is causing a constitutional crisis on that, saying he's still trying to get it in.
I can't imagine that even a Supreme Court packed with his supporters would go for that. They are going to be protective of their own authority, I think, as much as anybody else.
Right.
So I have a feeling they'd fight back, but we'll see. The Trump administration also has started its Human Rights Commission that's going to look for natural law as a basis for human rights in international affairs. this is raising alarm bells for a lot of people, especially LGBTQ groups. But I think in particular, it's also for pro-choice groups. It's a big problem because a lot of the language of rights has started to enter into women's rights and the women's right to choose. And so this is all aimed at undermining not only our protections, but their protections.
And what's this woman's name again? Let's see. The woman who's the chair of it is Mary Ann Glendon, former U.S. ambassador to the Vatican. She's a Harvard law professor, but she's an outspoken opponent of same-sex marriage and says, don't call me a bigot because I'm against same-sex marriage. I'm trying to preserve humanity and all this kind of stuff. So that's her. And of course, I guess we only touched on it last week. The biggest gay news of last week was the fact that the Supreme Court is going to hear this case at their first week, October 8th, which is going to decide whether discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, there are 3 cases, 2 gay, 1 transgender, is or is not sex discrimination.
Right. They're trying to they're going to determine whether it's covered under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but it'll also, if it's decided in our favor, it'll draw in also Title IX, the other sex discrimination statute. And this consolidates the case that includes the skydiver who was openly gay and who was fired when his employer found out that he was an openly gay skydiver. He's since died, but the case continues.
Right. And so everybody's weighing in on these cases. All the amicus briefs are being filed, including by
a bunch of Republicans. Now, okay, full confession, I have very little to no respect for gay Republicans, but it could potentially be important in swinging some opinion on the court that Republicans provide a conservative or Republican rationale for why we should be covered under the sex discrimination statutes. Among the people filing are Ken Mehlman, I say that with a sigh because I find him so irritating.
Former chair of the Republican Party, former campaign manager for Bush Jr.
And the guy who was the architect of getting anti-same-sex marriage ballot initiatives in many states as a ploy to get conservatives to the polls so that George Bush would be reelected.
In 2004, of course, with the strategy of Karl Rove as well on that.
So keep in mind, this is one of our own who targeted us so that he could get rich and get his boy elected. Then he takes his ill-gotten gains and buys himself a multi-million-dollar condo in Chelsea and lives high on the hog and then says, oh, now I'm in favor of same-sex marriage. And the Human Rights Campaign says, yay, let's make him a board member.
Oh, don't we want, he's a board member? Don't we want people to change?
I'm pretty sure he became a board member.
Don't we want people to change?
Oh, what?
I don't have much use for traitors, right. but some people I know who had bad positions in the past who have changed. I can remember a union leader getting up at the hearing on the gay rights bill in New York and saying, we used to beat them up, we used to make fun of them and everything, but come on, we've got to show respect. Times have changed, and he was a labor leader.
Yeah, I don't think so much changed for Ken Mehlman so much as the fact that he made his fortune and didn't have to support his boy anymore, so he could say, oh, now I've changed my mind.
He should give it all back.
Well, in my opinion, HRC should have hired him to lick envelopes for 15 years and get all the resultant paper cuts on his tongue, and after that penance, then we can think about readmitting him into the company of respectable gays.
You're not a Catholic, are you?
No.
No. All that repentance business.
But I am vengeful.
Okay. I believe in holding people's feet to the fire.
Other Republicans signing on to this brief are Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, Tom Campbell, Christopher Shays, Meg Whitman, and 2012 presidential candidate, and I think a friend of yours, Fred Karger.
We like Fred, of course, okay. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't understand why he stays in the party, but, a lot of people have left. I always say, folks, that there's very little excuse for being a Democrat and none for being a Republican. And that sounds partisan. I mean, come on, look what's happened to that party. It's just sunk so low. In fact, there's a book that's coming out. You remember the Access Hollywood tape, right?
Sure.
Where Trump said, grab him by the P word, right? We're not supposed to say it here on Free Speech TV. It's free speech. But all right. After that, Paul Ryan, who was the Speaker of the House, and other top Republicans called up Rance Priebus, who was running the campaign or running the Republican Party at the time, and said, get Trump off the ticket, put Pence in, and that's it. And Karen Pence, who is this devout Christian anti-gay activist, said to Mike, you get off that ticket or I'm not appearing with you in public for the rest of this campaign. Then Trump goes after Bill Clinton, starts saying, I'm going to lock him up as a rapist or something like that. And this fight back from Trump is what turned these Republicans around, that he's not willing to back down on anything and we're going to stand behind him. And they did. And they won.
And since then, they've all drunk the Kool-Aid. They've all fallen in line, almost all of them.
They have.
It's very frightening. Well, finally,
although Mitch McConnell has earned himself a strong opponent in Kentucky there.
yes, and
She's not the most liberal woman.
Well, you know what? If we can flip enough seats in the Senate,
Yes.
Party control is the most important thing. This is my mantra. The most important thing in a legislature is not any one particular legislator's party affiliation. It is one particular legislator's stand on an issue. It is his or her party affiliation, because it is in the aggregate. It is whether the Republicans or the Democrats control the legislature that makes all the difference. And what happens, and the power, the division of power, and what bills get passed. If you don't believe it, look at what's happened in California now that they've had Democratic control of both legislatures and the governorship for years, and look how quickly things have happened here in New York now that we finally have both houses of the legislature in Democratic hands.
But the Supreme Court said that gerrymandering is okay and we can't stop it. Some states have stopped it, but we're stuck with this decision, which makes it very, very difficult to take back the state legislatures in places like North Carolina and Michigan and and other states.
Difficult, but not impossible. What it means is
very difficult.
What it means is we have to play as dirty as the Republicans. That's what it means.
Well, but the Senate is still a profoundly anti-democratic, small d, democratic body, where 2 senators for North Dakota, 2 senators for South Dakota, which both together have fewer people than New York City and Los Angeles, and they get all this power, and I don't see how we can go on this way. Now, it's interesting to me that when Obama was elected, he came in with 60 Democratic senators that year, because people were so done with the Republican Party after the financial collapse.
Okay, but that's what I'm talking about. You say it's hard to flip the legislatures. It's hard, but it's not impossible. It can be done.
But look what happened in North Carolina in the last. They elected a Democratic governor, right, as a reaction to all this, but they kept the legislature, because of gerrymandering, in veto-proof Republican hands. So what do it's very, very tough.
We've got it. I'm not denying that we don't have an uphill climb.
I urge you in the states to pass referenda in your states, as they have in Iowa and other places, that ban gerrymandering. Have nonpartisan lines. Iowa has that. 10 other states have that.
And in your states, pay attention to what's happening on the state level. On the level of the state legislature. You've got to pay attention to that.
It's more important than who's going to be elected president.
You know what? I'm going to agree with you, Andy.
Yeah, it's more important. On the other hand, let's talk a little bit about the presidential race.
Okay.
So Pete Buttigieg, the out gay candidate, raised more cash than any other candidate in the last reporting period.
Even more than Biden.
$25 million.
Yeah. Biden raised 21, I believe, but there's a asterisk to that, because Buttigieg had more time to raise the money because he'd been in the race longer.
All right. But there was this poll that showed up. Do you think so-and-so could be elected president of the United States? And a lot of people said Biden could, and even Bernie could, or whatever. Buttigieg was like 1% of people thought he could actually be elected president. So he's getting all this money. He's getting a lot of gay support. You said you saw it out on Fire Island, right?
For sure. Yeah, I was out in the Pines visiting some friends, and there were posters all over the place for brunch with
Chasten Buttigieg. He's changed his name. He doesn't like his parents. They don't like him being gay.
Okay, well.
So he changed his name.
Brunch starting at $1,000 a plate. So, you know, in the Democratic Party, the gays have the wallets, the blacks are the reliable votes, and the Hispanics are the coveted swings.
Okay.
You heard it here first.
You got it? You got that? Joe Biden appears in Seattle at a gay event, and he said, 5 years ago, you'd be sitting at a business meeting and somebody made a crack about the gay waiter and nobody would have said anything. And somebody in the back goes, "Not in Seattle." So anyway, Joe needs to, he's trying, but he needs to get with the program. Ross Perot died this week. Not too much of a gay angle on that. He is the guy who got Bill Clinton elected twice by being in the race, splitting the Republican vote to a great extent, although he also took votes from Clinton. But he got 19% of the vote when he ran in 92. That's more than any third-party candidate in a long time, I think ever maybe. Anyway, one of the things about him, and he was seen as relatively pro-choice and things like that, but his firm, his big firm where he made these billions of dollars, is one of the only companies to have given domestic partner benefits and taken them away.
Guess who one of the others is? Exxon.
Oh, that's right. They did that.
Yep.
All right, I think I've got through all the Trump and political news.
Well,
what'd you do on the 4th of July?
What did I do on the 4th of July? Andy just wants me to say the name we came up with for this event. I had a bunch of people over, small group of my fellow gay birders. And
birders. These are bird watchers. Birders, for those of you who don't know.
Yeah, the current term is birder. That's the favorite term. So it was called the Gay Birders Put Meat Between Buns for the USA. We had hot dogs and hamburgers. Don't get mixed up about this.
Don't go crazy there. We're not saying any bad words.
But yes, that's what I did for the 4th of July. Right. It was a lot of fun.
And I went to the annual reading. This is going to sound so nerdy, but the annual reading of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution in Riverside Park by the statue of Eleanor Roosevelt, led by Norman Siegel. Bill joined us this year.
Norman Siegel is a famed civil rights attorney.
And he was the lawyer for the Alternative Pride March, which you were in. We ran, you said we ran a little tape of you at the march there. What kind of an experience? So thank you, Norman, for doing that every year. It's every year on the 4th of July at noon at the foot of West 72nd Street. Mark your calendar for next year.
The march was tremendous success. I mean, more people than I think anybody imagined. It was a lot of fun. I can't say that I agreed with every sentiment expressed in the march.
I hope not.
But it was wonderful to see.
Because you're allowed to express any sentiment you wanted to, essentially.
And that was the beauty of it, is that it was a wonderful diversity of opinions and, expressed as protest, just as the original first march after Stonewall was.
Right.
So if there was any year when that had to happen, it was this year at the 50th anniversary. Because later on, the other march was so corporate. It's been corporate for many years, but this year more than ever. And I was only there for literally 3 minutes because I was sleep deprived, I was exhausted, I was maybe a little bit drunk. I'm in the heat, and I'm like, all right, I'm dealing with the crowd, and I saw the gay cops go by, and I always love to cheer for the gay cops. And then, that's one of the sentiments I didn't agree with, was at the protest march, was like, there was one sign that said, abolish the NYPD. And I'm like, come on, get serious. Anyway, cheered for the gay cops. The next float that went by, my company, of my employer. I was like, oh, hell no. And I just went home. I was done.
I couldn't even go. It's the first time I haven't gone to that parade in 45, 46 years. Because I am sick of it. And I realize a lot of people enjoy it and they have a great time. But it's not
12 hours!
12 and a half hours.
Oh!
It ended midnight, apparently. I mean, I came home from the alternative march, and I had walked 6.5 miles, ultimately 8 miles that day, which I know is not a lot for you youngsters, but I was tired.
Yeah.
I was tired.
Yeah.
But I had a good time.
It was quite overwhelming the whole weekend, but it was the biggest party ever in New York. I think they estimate De Blasio estimated 5 million people.
They said, I certainly saw a lot of people around on the streets.
Crazy.
Very hard to move around
It took
town.
hours to get into the bars
Let's
over the
do
weekend.
it somewhere else next year. Another town take it over. Well, I mean, what did I read about this year? Paxton, Illinois, a town of 4,500 people, saw 169 people march in their first Pride March, and it's a farm town.
I think that's wonderful. Wonderful. From 20 different communities participated in the event. Go Paxton, Illinois.
And as long as we're talking about Pride stuff, we talk about all the exhibits that are still up in New York, at the Public Library, a big exhibit at the New York Historical Society, at the Museum of the City of New York. All the museums have things. But in Detroit, they have an exhibit at the Detroit Historical Museum. It's up all summer till September 29th. It's called Invisible No Longer, LGBTQ Detroit.
All right. While we're talking about the bars, I want to get this in. There's a bar uptown in Harlem called the Alibi Lounge.
The Alibi Lounge.
And they've got flags, rainbow flags out front, like a lot of places, but their rainbow flags got vandalized twice.
Burned,
exactly. Burned it twice in a week or in a month. Within a month.
1 month ago, and then,
basically in just over a month's time.
Yeah. Same guy. They finally caught him.
His name is Tyrese Singleton, 20 years old, and he's in custody and likely to be charged with arson and also with the hate crime.
Criminal mischief.
And interestingly enough, our governor, New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo, got involved, which seems like overkill, but we welcome his support.
Yes.
He asked the State Police Hate Crimes Task Force to help the NYPD and get involved.
By the way, by the time you see the show, you may know the verdict in the Abel Cedeno case that I've been covering up at the Bronx. This was a bullied gay student who came to school with a knife for the first time and brought it to school for protection. And he was early in the year, in 2017, in September, people were throwing things at him, and he confronted the class and said, "Who's doing that? You all," and he used the P word, which we've been talking about, and some kid came around to attack him, and he holds up the knife, and the guy attacks him anyway, and he pierces his heart, kills him, and slashes another kid who came up to beat the hell out of him. It's being heard by a judge in the Bronx. But what happened this week, and it certainly traumatized the kids in that class to see this in front of them. I don't recommend bringing a knife to school, but we never, people. What do you do when you're bullied your whole life? This is what happened. All right. But today at the trial, when we're taping, apparently one of the kids got on the stand to describe what he saw happen in the class, and then
this was a witness for the prosecution or for the defense?
Witness for the prosecution.
Okay.
And then the defendant, Abel Cedeno, passes his lawyers a screenshot of something on Facebook that this witness posted that said, "We've got to kill this guy." Right after the incident. So I don't know how it's, by the time you see this, you may have seen what happened, but wow, the whole thing is a tragedy for everybody.
If there's a moral to take away, it's that far better to intervene early and stop the bullying rather than let it escalate to a point like this.
Yes. Okay. Well, speaking, as long as we're on crime stories, Kevin Spacey, I'm not a fan of his behavior, but on the other hand, this guy who said he was 18 and was groped by him in Nantucket, right? Mm-hmm. The case is falling apart. May have fallen apart by the time you see this, because the young man seems to have lost the cell phone where he had some of what he said was evidence about this, and may have deleted some texts, and now starts to take the Fifth Amendment, saying I don't want to testify in this case, and has dropped his own civil suit. So it's on that case, it's not looking bad for.
What do you think his motivation is?
For what? For bringing it?
No, for dropping it, for losing the phone.
Because he had texts on there, apparently exchanges with his girlfriend or something that might have been mitigating to Spacey, and. Now, Spacey is being investigated for 6 cases of sexual assault in London, but no charges have been filed there either. Okay. Some other news around the nation?
Sure. Andy, you don't like this story, but Amazon
Go ahead.
has stopped...
Whoa. Go ahead, do the story before I say what I think about it.
Okay. Amazon has stopped selling a book from a California therapist that promoted conversion therapy.
Joseph Nicolosi. What's the name of the book?
The name of the book is A Parent's Guide to Preventing Homosexuality. So it's a conversion therapy kind of thing. And Amazon has decided to stop selling it.
So what do you think?
Well, you've almost swung me. You've almost swung me.
Do we want to ban books is my question.
Exactly.
I mean, the Bible has a lot of bad stuff in it, too. I don't want to stop selling it. I mentioned Alan Cranston, the former senator of California, is the one who published Mein Kampf, Hitler's book, in the United States because he wanted people to see what Hitler was saying. I get nervous about banning books. But
all right. I can see that.
There was a lot of gay pressure on Amazon. Stop selling this hateful book. Well,
I mean, Amazon is a business. They get to decide what they want to sell.
They get to decide what everybody gets to sell at this point.
And that's kind of, I guess that's kind of your point. I mean, it's not government censorship. Let's put it that way. But
right. All right. In New York State, we had a good decision from an appellate court. They revived a father's petition to adopt his own biological son because he'd used surrogacy. We don't have surrogacy in New York, but he had used a volunteer, not a paid surrogate. And so some judge said, "Oh, you can't do this, and I'm not going to give you adoption of your own son, biological son." And the appellate court said, "Come on, this is and it was a gay case."
In California, in San Diego, this is an interesting story. A guy named Rashawn Johnson won $300,000 from the city of San Diego because he was basically harassed on religious grounds by his then supervisor, a woman named Sheila Beale. And the reason why this has a gay angle is because it first came up when Rashawn was asked by Sheila Beale, "Oh, what do you think of this whole Proposition 8 thing, the ballot initiative that would have stopped same-sex marriage in California?" Exactly. And Rashawn Johnson said, I think people should be able to marry whoever they want. And Beale said, "You're not a child of God," was her response to that. And after that, she actually went so far as to tell other employees not to follow Johnson's orders because he was a non-believer. So he filed a complaint in October 2015. Mind you, this is October 2015. He just won his $300,000 now in 2019.
Oh, the wheels of justice turn slowly.
Very slowly. But the complaint was verified then. What did they do? They transferred Rashawn Johnson and left Beale where she was. She eventually became deputy director, and here's the kicker: she's still working there as the deputy director.
I think I may have encountered her in the Bronx. I was up covering this trial in the Bronx, and I went to the supermarket across the street from the courthouse, and unbidden, this woman comes up to me and says, "Jesus loves you, I'm just a woman pushing a car along, I said, "Well, he seems like a nice fellow, but I'm an atheist, so, take it easy."
And what did she say? Moved on?
She moved on. We didn't, there was some better news from the United States House of Representatives, and I was kind of surprised to read this. This is the House Ways and Means Committee, the most powerful committee. They passed a bill to clean up the tax code to accommodate same-sex couples and use the word spouse instead of husband and wife and things like that, but also to let you claim, this is important, folks, if you got in a relationship a while ago, to strike down, if you want to claim refunds to which you were entitled but you were denied because DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, didn't let you, you may be able to recover some of this under this revision in the code.
That's fantastic.
This is important.
Yeah.
The news is, the House is controlled by Democrats. It passed unanimously in the committee. Nobody objected to it. Maybe it was a voice vote. I don't know if it means Mitch McConnell's going to allow it on the floor in the Senate, but...
Not to sound like a broken record, but this is why I say party affiliation matters. The party that controls the legislature gets to set the agenda. It's where all the power lies. Pay attention to party affiliation.
Are you impressed that the number of LGBTQ elected officials, according to the Victory Institute, has increased by almost 25% in the past year?
That's pretty impressive.
But what percentage does that give us of officials? 0.13%. Now, we're supposed to be at least 4% of the population, maybe 6% of the population. If you include everybody who's doing stuff out there, maybe, a lot more. But we have a total of 689 known LGBTQ officials. But they do say that people of color, bi and trans people, and cisgender women are among those increasing at the fastest rate. And I think oppressed people are more motivated to run for office.
I think seeing what's happening in this country, yes, that would be especially true, especially with women.
Somebody who wants to get back in the game is Mark Foley. Remember him?
Yes.
I had to look it up. He resigned in 2006 in a page scandal of hitting on male pages.
Sure.
He was a conservative, conservative Republican. He's a big pal of Trump's down there in Florida, and he wants to get back in.
All right, back to hopscotching some of the states. In Tennessee, a new bathroom bill just went into effect on Monday, and some very brave teenagers were speaking out against it. So, hats off to them. But,
what are they doing about it?
Well, basically, they're telling about how it will impact their lives and how it puts them at risk as transgendered students to have to go and use, the boys' bathroom.
It's totally hateful.
So, supposedly there was some last-minute changes to the bill that made it not anti-trans, but that's pretty transparently not the case.
They also passed a bill in Tennessee. You got more on that?
No, that's good.
They also passed a law in Tennessee that only priests, ministers, and rabbis, people designated by a temple or a church, can perform weddings and justices of the peace. So if you've got a online ordination, you can't do one of these ceremonies. So the Universal Life Church is suing over this bill.
I think we should get a bunch of people certified by the Satanic Temple and send them to Tennessee.
I think we should. Let's see.
In Puerto Rico, lots of LGBTQ spaces are closed and closing. The three of the main ones in the San Juan area have closed, and this is all, of course, in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. They're still trying to recover from that.
Do not forget. In Orlando, Harris Rosen is the guy who sort of has built up most of the hotels in Orlando. He came to an LGBT journalist conference that I was at. He shows up in sneakers and dressed down and a golf shirt or something like that, but talks about all the philanthropy he does. A lot of it is in education. And they have contributed $1 million in tax credits to school vouchers. This is a system I'm not necessarily in favor of, where you can sort of designate your money to go to the state to help charter schools and all these other schools. But he realized that a lot of these charter schools or these private schools that get these vouchers, right, are anti-gay and discriminate against gay families and say no gays here. So he said, I don't want any of our money going to this stuff anymore. And that's terrific.
Good. Quick personal note.
Harris Rosen.
Quick personal note on the same theme. When I was working at Marvel Comics, I used to have like dozens of boxes and boxes, dozens of boxes of comics, and you had to get rid of them eventually. So I was looking for a place to give them to, and there was a Foundling Hospital over on 6th Avenue that I took them down to, and someone said, "Oh, sister would love to thank you personally." I'm like, "Sister?" Turns out it was a Catholic institution, so I'm like, because Catholic Church and our kind don't always blend.
Right, they think we're intrinsically disordered.
Precisely.
Most of the nuns don't think that.
But I bit my tongue and I did it, and then the very next morning I woke up and the Bishop of Brooklyn, I forget his name, he may still be Bishop of Brooklyn, but he was on the radio saying, the gays, they're intrinsically disordered, they shouldn't be near children, blah, blah, blah. I called up the Foundling Hospital, I spoke to Sister, I said, "Sister, those comic books I dropped off, I want them all back."
Did you take them back?
I didn't. I let her sit for the day thinking that I was going to do this, and then I thought it's not fair to the kids, so I just let them, but I never gave them again.
It's a struggle.
Never gave to them again.
It's a struggle. Well, they're trying to help LGBTQ youth in California. All right, let me explain.
Okay.
If you have I'm gonna use some words here. They're not bad words, but if you have penile vaginal sex with someone 14 to 17 years old and you are within 10 years of them, that's statutory rape if you're older, right? Mm-hmm. But a judge is allowed to decide whether you go on the sex offender registry if you are within 10 years.
Kind of like a Romeo and Juliet clause.
Yes, only for penile vaginal sex. So what they're changing the law to say, hey, that means that you automatically go on the sex offender registry if it's oral sex or if it's anal sex.
That's bizarre.
It is bizarre, and they're trying to fix it there in the California legislature.
All right.
It doesn't excuse these acts, but it does give judges some discretion. All right, you got Governor Jay Pritzker in Illinois signed an executive order to better support trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming students. And they also passed a bill in California in the Assembly to protect sex workers from arrest when they report violent crimes against them. And it bans the use of condoms as a basis to arrest sex workers. That's good.
That's very good.
And in Jacksonville, Florida, they canceled the Storybook Pride Prom for LGBT teens at the local library after a backlash. So who picked it up? I don't know if you approve of this outfit. The Unitarian Church.
Oh, Unitarians are great.
Okay. All right. Some
international.
Oh no. What about Jerrod Carmichael?
Well, wouldn't that be entertainment news?
Well, let's do him now
Okay.
if we can, because I got him in that order.
Okay, sounds good.
He's a comedian, an actor, and has come out.
And I don't know much about him. I have to confess, I don't watch his show, so I feel a little out of things.
All right.
But he came out on something called The Breakfast Club in an interview with Charlemagne the God. Don't know her either.
Him.
Don't know him either. But yeah, it's a big deal. I mean, anytime any sort of African-American celebrity comes out, it's a big deal.
And he did an HBO home video special where he hinted at his sexuality. That was the name of it, home videos. And then Lil Nas X, a singer, has come out.
A rapper who did a song called Old Town Road. Now again, okay, I'm old. I don't know the song, or I didn't know the song until I read about this. But it's a catchy little tune, I have to admit. It's really kind of fun. And he ended up cutting a version with Billy Ray Cyrus that shot to the top of the charts and actually was about to hit the top of the country charts when the country music authorities, whoever they are, said, oh, this isn't country enough, so we're kicking it off the chart.
Country music has not been too kind to gay people.
Yeah, well, apparently they didn't like this, and that was even before he came out. So this is a guy who has one of the biggest songs in the country, an African-American, a rapper, where, usually or notoriously, there's a lot of homophobia in that community, and he has come out, and he's like, you know what? If it costs me fans, that's what it costs me, but I'm going to come out.
Okay.
And good for him.
All right. We have some sad news. Someone very beloved in the AIDS community, especially, Douglas Crimp, an art historian, an art professor, has died at the age of 74. He was a professor at the University of Rochester. He was an essayist. His big art philosophy was not what a picture portrayed, but what it did when it was released on the world. But he wrote an essay called AIDS, Cultural Analysis, Cultural Activism, about art and AIDS, and became an active member of ACT UP. He encouraged artists to be more activist. And he took on people who blamed AIDS on people who got AIDS. In a big way.
Apparently, the thought is that you can't write about art historical essays in the second half of the 20th century without mentioning his name. So he was a big deal in art historian circles.
It was Douglas Crimp, dead at the age of 74. And then we got some sad news, not of a death, but of a stroke on the Miss Major Griffin Gracie at the age of 78 has had a stroke. Miss Major, as she is known, was a Stonewall participant, suffered a stroke on the 4th of July. In 2017, she moved from San Francisco to Little Rock to open the House of GC, Griffin Gacy, which is going to be a retreat center for trans and gender nonconforming people, for which they have selected a location. I mean, if you're going to open up a center for people, you may wonder why you go to places like Little Rock. It's a lot cheaper than it is to do in San Francisco or Oakland or whatever.
Just out of curiosity, when they say a center, was this like a retirement?
Yeah, a retreat center.
retreat center.
Yeah, a retreat center for
And it just
folks.
occurs to me, what are trans and gender nonconforming people supposed to do in retirement?
What are we all supposed to do at this point? I hope we hold on to Medicare. I hope we'll talk about it later in AIDS News about the Affordable Care Act. I want to catch up a little bit. I think we have enough time to talk about, we did some interviews during the garden party of the LGBT Community Center. And one of the people I ran into was Catherine Linton, who used to be one of the hosts on In the Life. And we were asking people, what are your thoughts on Stonewall 50? What are your thoughts about the movement going forward? So if we can pull up, she produced this, she produced the wonderful MSNBC special that was Rebellion Stonewall. That was really good. If you had a chance to catch it on MSNBC, maybe not.
I think I did see part of it.
She did a great job on it. But here's what Catherine Linton had to say.
How do I feel at the 50th World Pride celebration? I feel both amazingly proud of our community, but I want our community to know that this isn't over, that we're in a real backlash right now, and that we have a lot of work to do here. We're still going to be fired in more than half the states in this country. The Trump administration is in an all-out war against LGBTQ people, and so we're not done. I'm here to celebrate, but to say that we're not done.
Okay, Catherine, and I also ran into my first TV wife before I was with Ann. I was with Lee Sharmat on the Gay Cable Network, and there she was. We were together 25 years ago. We're still friends. I see her at events like this. Lee Sharmat was Ann's predecessor. You imagine Ann having a predecessor, because I've been with Ann for so long. I also want to bring you that we talked briefly to the Speaker of the City Council, Corey Johnson, and we're going to run his tape on
You mean the next mayor of New York City?
He's running for mayor of New York. He's out gay, out HIV positive.
Happy Stonewall 50. Stonewall 50 means to me us looking back on all the progress we've made in 50 years, but also taking stock that there is still a lot of work to do in this country. And for me, this month, and especially this upcoming weekend, is really about celebrating the activists and advocates who put their lives and bodies on the line, people who were part of ACT UP, people who were there that night in 1969, people who were part of the Gay Activists Alliance, who were down at the firehouse, the real activists, the people that made all of this progress possible when it wasn't easy to do it, when it was really hard and where you didn't have the protections. So as a 37-year-old openly gay man, openly HIV positive man, I want to say thank you to all of the people who came before me. Thank you very much.
You've been out for a few years yourself, haven't you?
20. 1999 I came out. You had been out for decades by that point.
I was not, and finally, I want to bring the big Broadway producer, Ted Snowden, was there, who also does philanthropy in the LGBT community, and I wanted to get his comment in. It was just a very short comment from Ted Snowden.
Hi, Ted Snowden here. I'm thrilled to be part of Stonewall 50. I started doing marches in '76. I'm thrilled to be back at them again, and very exciting time to be alive. Somewhat scary, worried about things, working on politics. Let's all do our part, and God bless Andy Humm, and God bless Global Pride 50.
I asked our director to cut the God bless Andy Humm business, but it was very nice of you, Ted. I did try to edit that.
Andy, you've been working very hard for a very long time.
And then
you deserve their praise.
I ran into my friends Michael Paley and his partner Noel, and they were with 3 women from Australia who were part of the Stonewall Rebellion in Australia in 1978. I didn't know about this when they started what's now the Mardi Gras. Those women were at this thing. 53 people were arrested for trying to have a pride celebration, and people were beaten by the cops. The cops have subsequently had to apologize, so a lot of history going on. So let's get into international news, and maybe we segue into London Pride, where Peter Tatchell, who was here for Stonewall 50, was back in London, and he's there with his partner and with, you recognize him, Ian McKellen, there in London Pride. Okay, other international news.
Well, bad news from Botswana. We had good news from Botswana recently when their court legalized same-sex marriage and rejected the prohibitions on same-sex marriage. Well, unfortunately, their president has decided to appeal that decision. So now that the prohibitions on same-sex marriage may be reinstated. So it's all got to work its way through the court, and we'll have to see what happened. The original case, was brought by a university student. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his name. But, hats off to that university student for bringing the case in the first place. And
in India, the Delhi High Court has dismissed a marriage equality case, says it's the prerogative of the legislature.
Meanwhile, in Latin America and Costa Rica, the education minister has been forced to resign for a lot of reasons, but part of the reasons is his approach on LGBT issues, including allowing transgender students to use the bathroom of their choice. They actually blockaded a Costa Rican Caribbean port to try to get this guy to resign, and it worked.
In Bogota, the out lesbian candidate for mayor, Claudia Lopez of the Green Alliance, is now the overwhelming favorite in the polls, and she's to be the mayor there in Bogota.
Do I get to make my war cry? Sure. Lesbia Victoriae!
Okay. And as in Ecuador.
As in Ecuador, where now, finally, same-sex marriage has gone into effect. Again, Lesbia Victoriae!
And the Electoral Council there in Ecuador has blocked a referendum to overturn it.
Excellent. Not such excellent news in another part of Latin America, in Central America, in Honduras, where 3 trans women have been killed in a single week, including Santi Carvajal, who was host of La Galaxia de Santi, which was a program where she talked about her life and brought attention to trans issues, and 2 other trans women killed within the same week in Honduras, so they're having a hard time down there.
But in El Salvador, 3 police were charged with the murder of a trans woman, Camila Diaz Cordova. She had come here to ask for asylum and been denied in 2017. She went back to El Salvador, and she was murdered.
The same thing happened to a Honduran woman, Roxana Hernandez, trans woman who came from Honduras to U.S. seeking asylum, died in U.S. custody.
Well, what's going on, look, folks, the fact that we let this go on for another day in this country without storming the borders and stopping it, it's just, it makes you ashamed to be an American.
Well, and I think it also points out to the intersectionality that, you guys are always talking about on this show, you and Ann, about how, the issues are not separate, how, immigration, a lot of the immigrants are us, fleeing persecution in places where we can't be us. So that's really important.
But I'm not down at the border.
Well,
I'm sitting here.
But you know what the wonderful thing was? I was stuck in California at the time, unfortunately. But when Trump first proposed his Muslim ban, and people got out there and they shut down JFK, I was reading about that, and I'm like, I want to be there. It was a glorious.
I just happened to be coming back from London at the time, so I joined one of the demonstrations at the border, and it was quite moving. All right, big news from about Northern Ireland, not from Northern Ireland. The United Kingdom, they don't have a legislature that's functioning in Northern Ireland.
Right.
So the UK Parliament is controlling, and they have said you either do same-sex marriage and abortion rights by October 21st, or we're going to do it.
And this is important because Northern Ireland is the only part of the United Kingdom without same-sex marriage right now. It's in Wales, it's in England, it's in Scotland, but it's not in Northern Ireland. It's the only holdout.
The gay bill passed in the Parliament of the United Kingdom, 383 to 73, for same-sex marriage. Now, of course, they're also saying this could precipitate a no-deal Brexit. It's very complicated politically, but there you are. They're blocking Grindr in Lebanon. Horrible. In Istanbul, police used tear gas to disperse the banned Pride March. In Saudi Arabia, Nicki Minaj, though, pulled out of a concert when she got a lot of pressure from women's groups and LGBT groups to don't perform there. Where else? In Georgia, the Tbilisi
former Soviet Georgia.
Right. So yes, not where Stacey Abrams is. Tbilisi Pride was canceled due to threats, but activists held a small gay pride anyway on July the 8th, and they ran away, of course, when the right wing got wind of it, and they were going to go storm them. So, whatever. You
got to give the hats off to all these brave activists who undertake these things in these places.
And the brave guy in the LGBT campaigner, Munir Batour in Tunisia, is running for president. He's an out gay candidate for president. He knows he's not going to win, but like Pete Buttigieg, he's causing some fuss. Okay, he's the founder of the gay group there. All right, AIDS news.
All right, AIDS news. Michael Johnson, free at last.
Michael Johnson was prosecuted and persecuted under the law about HIV transmission if you don't tell your partner, and they gave him 30 years. And
longer sentence than you would get than the state average for second degree.
Put the picture up there. That's Stephen Thrasher on the left there, who was the journalist who really dogged this story, and that's Michael there on the right. And then show a picture of Michael on the left there, happy Michael, out of prison 25 years early.
And his 30-year sentence is longer than the state average for second-degree murder. Nobody died from anything he did, but this is about criminalization of HIV.
Well, a lot of people are going to die if the Trump administration gets its way with the Affordable Care Act. They are in court, and they seem to be succeeding in overturning the Affordable Care Act. So we lost a lower court decision on this, which said that the whole act is unconstitutional. This appellate court looks like they're going to uphold the same. We're not sure. Then it'll go to the Supreme Court next year in the middle of the campaign. I don't think, and the word is that Republicans are terrified that the Affordable Care Act is going to be completely destroyed in the middle of the campaign.
I was about to say, if there is one silver lining, it is that if the Affordable Care Act is destroyed in the middle of the campaign, I suspect that is going to be a tremendous boost to the Democrats and may help us get rid of that man in the White House.
And Trump did one good thing, right? He said, let's put the prices of prescription drugs on television ads. And a court said, you can't do that.
Well, his whole approach is, I'm going to do what I want to do, and without regard to the law.
But I'd like to see what the prices of drugs are.
I'm not saying I'm against having prescription drug prices on TV. I'm just saying, you can't just sort of say, that has to be done.
The suit against Gilead, the pharmaceutical company, for stopping a safer, effective treatment for HIV from going into effect that they held back for 10 years because they wanted to make more money about what they had, their version of the drug, TDF. That's moving forward. They're making progress on that. But boy, Gilead behaved badly on that. And that killed a lot of people.
And isn't Gilead one of the big funders of a lot of these LGBT causes?
You bet.
Trying to cover their tracks.
You bet. What else? The California Assembly passed a bill to increase access to PrEP. But I mean, for God's sakes, again, let's get this out there at a very cheap rate, the way they do in Australia, where it costs next to nothing, so that everybody can have it and everybody can live in peace. I don't, what we do about pharmaceutical drugs in this country. I mean, Trump claims to care about it, but the Democrats claim to care about it. But who's doing anything about it?
Well, in particular with PrEP, because PrEP, the studies that created the PrEP treatment were funded by the government, by the U.S. government.
You know what this show is? It's an ongoing discussion about everything that's going on. It's been great to have it with you this week, Chris Cooper.
Thank you, Andy. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Extraordinaire. We will be
Lesbia Victoriae.
And we will be back with the victorious lesbian Ann Northrup on next week's show. It's been great being here. We're winding down from an exhausting Pride Month. We're kind of glad it's over, but we hope you will use that strength to fight for everything you need to do in the future, inspired by the women's soccer team.
Fight on.